We have finished Descartes' text. So today we will look at the topics. I have already sent you the questions. We will discuss them one after another. In case the audio drops or you have any problem, you let me know. So the first question, you look at your questions in your WhatsApp group. How does Descartes intertwine the themes of romantic love and marriage with commercial success in the shoemaker's holiday? So this question combines a number of topics: love, marriage and commerce. And the question could also be divided into two separate questions. So there could be a separate question on the display of the commercial ethos of the period in this play. So we will have to talk about the plots, the romantic plot, the plot of love affair leading to marriage between Lacey and Rose, and the commercial success, the plot of Getting Rich Quick, which we find in Simon Eyer's story. So how these two different plots are intertwined in this play. Insofar as the plot of romantic love and marriage are concerned, we may say that this is the staple of any comedy. So we have a romantic couple, like romantic couples in any other comedy. The only difference with other comedies is that the lovers are from different classes. So that aspect will be discussed in detail or asked in a different question, the cross-class marriage or so on. So we have a romantic couple and their love ends in marriage, as is the convention of comedy. And in spite of all obstacles presented by their guardians, Lacey and Rose, they are successful in marrying each other. And as we see that in this play, the king has a role to play. He is the final arbiter or judge to whom Otley and Lincoln, their guardians, complain. And the king first divorces them and then joins their hands in harmonious marriage. This aspect of the plot is to some extent a fantasy, because in the 16th century the king did not have power to grant divorce to anybody. This power lay with the priests, or in case of important people like Henry VIII, like kings and emperors, the power lay with the Pope. Therefore, the king granting them divorce and then marrying them off, it is not acceptable in realistic terms. But since comedy is also a world of fantasy, so for the sake of fantasy we can accept the king making them first divorce each other and then marrying each other. And the theme of romantic love and marriage is further reinforced by the subplot of Ralph and Jane and Hammond. We may say that is a parallel to the main love affair between Lacey and Rose, Hammond at first woos Rose, and Rose rejects him. So we see there that Hammond plays the role of an aristocrat and thus wants to appear superior to Rose. Initially we see that Hammond is engaged in hunting, which was a preoccupation of aristocratic people. Hammond, however, is no aristocrat. He is a noble, he is a citizen, a gentleman. So why does he play the role of an aristocrat? Obviously to impress Rose. Rose also belongs to the middle class, but she wants to ascend the social hierarchy by marrying in a higher class. And when she finds or she realizes that Hammond does not belong to aristocracy, then she rejects him. And she actually loves and marries Lacey, who belongs to the aristocracy, and thus she is successful in this ascent in social hierarchy. The pursuit of Jane by Hammond would have been scandalous, considering the fact that Jane is a married wife, but the circumstances are so that it is not unlikely for a man to pursue Jane, because her husband has been sent to France, and people who participated in a foreign war, most of them would not come back, most of them would die. In this play, Ralph comes back, even though he is lame, but he comes back with his life, and he is also able to pursue his craft of shoemaking, which we may say is a kind of a fantasy, because it does not conform to reality. At one place in the play, we get a report of the war, where we hear that some 4,000 men of unknown identity died in the war, whereas only 2 aristocratic men died who are known to Lincoln. Therefore, Ralph could well have been among those 4,000 dead men, and in that case, pursuing Jane would have been quite natural for any gentleman or any suitor or lover. The fact that Hammond does not succeed in marrying Jane, and Jane is reunited with her lost husband Ralph, that aspect of the plot, or that part of the plot, again we may say it belongs to the realm of fantasy, because it does not conform to reality. However, the romantic love and marriage plots of romantic love and marriage are well established, following dramatic conventions, and a main plot and a parallel subplot support each other and establish the comedy as a romantic drama. But some complications, or we may say some complexities, are introduced when the play also intends or pretends to become a play about commerce. Since the Elizabethan period was a period of accumulation of capital and a lot of commercial activity, therefore it would not be inappropriate in a comedy to display or to demonstrate the rise of commerce, which we find in Ben Jonson's plays, Volpone, or we find in other city comedies as well. City comedies, they focused on the city, and therefore the commercial activities of the city often found a place in these plays. Therefore, in this play we find Simon Eyre becoming rich by purchasing the cargo of a Dutch captain, of a Dutch merchant, and for some legal reason the Dutch merchant cannot show his head, that is, cannot appear himself and sell his goods, and so the captain acts on his behalf, and since the Dutch captain has a good relationship with Lacey, who here is in the disguise of a Dutch shoemaker, so Lacey arranges matters in such a way that Simon would make a huge profit by buying all these luxury goods cheaply and selling them at a higher price. Therefore, this becoming rich quickly and ascending the social hierarchy, it conforms to the broader paradigm of social ascent or class mobility. And this part of the story also brings in the issue of race or the commercial activity by the Dutch in England at that time. So many critics have pointed out how the Dutch provided sometimes a threat to English traders or English artisans, and they were gradually growing in number. But that is another aspect which we may focus particularly on in another question. So the question here is how far Dekker is successful in intertwining these two different themes in the play: the theme of love and marriage, romantic love and marriage, and that of commercial success. So we may say that the two themes are presented by two plots. The romantic plot of Lacey and Rose, which has a parallel, to it in the love affair or in the reunion between Ralph and Jane. And the second plot is the plot of Simon Eyre with the help of Marjorie becoming quickly rich. And the role of Marjorie, I suppose, in this play is downplayed a little, but in Dekker's source, that is Thomas Deloney, the role of Marjorie is greater. So if you look at the appendix to this edition, you see an excerpt from Deloney, and here the chapter 10 from Deloney is titled "How Sir Simon Eyre, being at first a shoemaker, became in the end Lord Mayor of London through the counsel of his wife." So Dekker in this play presents Marjorie as an interesting character, but mostly as a minor character, I would say. She does not have much role to play, and Simon seems to dominate the scene whenever he is present. So we may say that Marjorie only has a supportive role. Her role is limited to demonstrating the growing rich quick theme by wearing all the luxury items of dress as she changes herself from a middle class shoemaker's wife to a lady. Therefore, we would say that the two plots, the romantic plot and the plot of commercial success in Simon Ayer's career, they are intertwined successfully in this play because they do not seem to be in conflict. By making Simon Ayer an accomplice or a support in Lacey's cause of marrying Rose, as well as by making Lacey an accomplice or support in Simon Ayer's growing rich, the two plots are entangled very cleverly, and therefore the audience never feels that there is any anything unusual in the simultaneous progress of the two plots. And Dekker also manages to present the two plots alternately, the romantic plot and that of the shoemakers. Alright, so we go on to the next question. Discuss the Shoemaker's Holiday as a citizen drama. So here we will have to talk about the genre of citizen drama or city comedy. And we may refer to critics who speak on this genre. I will give you a few essays when my laptop returns. My laptop has gone for repairing, which will help you in answering some of these questions. The essay that I would like you to read on this aspect is this one, the essay by Robert D. Hume, The Sociopolitics of London Comedy from Johnson to Steele. I am showing this as a presentation. Okay, so I will send you the essays. For the moment, I will read from this essay. It is by Robert D. Hume, The Sociopolitics of London Comedy from Johnson to Steele. The critic who first spoke about city comedy was Brian Gibbons, who published a book called Jacobean City Comedy in 1968. In City Comedy, he conceived it, dramatists articulated a radical critique of their age. They dramatized conflicting forces in the confused development from the England of Elizabeth toward the Civil War. So this period from the reign of Elizabeth to the Civil War, in this period there were a lot of changes happening, particularly in the spheres of economics and commerce. And city comedy would capture these moods and emotions associated with these changes. How does Gibbon describe city comedy? He says, we might define the genre city comedy by the fact that the plays are all satiric and have urban settings, with characters and incidents appropriate to such settings. They exclude material appropriate to romance, fairy tale, sentimental legend, or patriotic chronicle. Therefore, city comedy, according to Gibbons, is mostly satirical and has urban setting, and the characters and incidents are appropriate to an urban setting, and therefore fairy tale, sentimental legend or patriotic chronicle, these themes are absent in a city comedy. So we may say that in the Shoemaker's Holiday we find an urban setting in London, and the characters who are presented here, they all come from the different types of people living in London. The aristocratic person, the nobleman, the gentleman, the artisan, the craftsman, and so on. The salesmen, because the shoemakers, they are the craftsmen. They also sell shoes, and Jane earns her living by selling cloth or different items of dress. So trade and commerce is very much represented in the activities of the characters. Simon, of course, himself is he appears to be a trader, more of a trader than a shoemaker. So whereas his workers are depicted as making a shoe or making shoes, Simon is never depicted doing all these things. So from the very beginning, Simon is depicted as an owner of the shoemaking factory, and therefore a man of commerce. Another approach to the definition of city comedy was that by Alexander Legat in 1973. He was more interested in the presentation of citizens than in issues of genre. Legat covers plays set in England that deal with a predominantly middling social class, neither with court and aristocracy, nor with workmen, servants and vagabonds. So the middling class, that is, they do not belong to either to aristocracy or to working class, but they are like Simon Eyre. They belong to the middle rank, or even Otley, a grocer. So they are middle class people, and Legat says that citizen comedy cuts across a variety of comic models, the satiric, the didactic, and the simply amusing, everything from lightweight farce to pieces that verge on domestic drama. A number of comic modes, satire, didacticism, amusement, farce, domestic drama, all these modes can be found in a city comedy. So if we take these definitions into account, then we can say that in Dekker's play we find characters who are all urban in nature, who are middle class characters. Hammond, for example, a gentleman, and those who are craftsmen, they also aspire to rise in society, and therefore their activities, mostly commercial activities or even shoemaking activity, the working class ethos which is described through their activities, and the community bond which is displayed by the shoemakers as members of a guild. And then the play ends with a lot of commercial negotiations with the king. Simon Eyre asked from the king permission to carry on trade and commerce in Leadenhall, and the king grants this permission for 2 days a week. Therefore, these actions, they all establish the shoemaker's comedy as a city comedy. We have here two terms. One is city comedy and the other is citizen drama. And these two terms are often used synonymously. City comedy was coined by Brian Gibbons, and citizen comedy was coined by Alexander Legat. and we tend to use these terms synonymously. Therefore, you should not be confused if any of these terms is used. Okay. Alright, so I go on to the next question. Comment on Dekker's focus on the material culture of the time in the play The Shoemaker's Holiday. So this question is to some extent similar to the question on the commercial ethos in the play. By material culture, one would understand the importance of things in this play, and this aspect is very well discussed by the editor Jonathan Gill Harris in the New Mermaids edition, that things themselves seem to take upon a life of their own in this play, and so many things are mentioned, so many various kinds of merchandise, items of consumption are mentioned in this play. Now, how do these things become important? We have seen that the Dutch captain tells Simon Eyre that there are thousand things in the ship, and they are all luxury items. So there is a kind of a temptation about these things, and Simon Eyre cannot but buy all these things, as he is tempted to procure the luxury items and by that means become rich by selling them. So on the one hand, this commercial angle in which the things are important. On the other hand, the idea of luxurious consumption, which was a hallmark of the rich and noble in the Elizabethan period. Because of colonial trade, luxury items were imported from all over the globe in London, in England, and the rich people, they would wear such fashionable items of dress. So we have a material representation of that through Marjorie, who wears French hood and other luxury items and becomes a lady through the use or consumption of such items. Therefore, the things have a role to play in social ascent or upward social mobility. The more one could amass, procure and consume such things, one would rise in the social ladder. Okay. Therefore, we may say, by discussing the commercial aspect of life as it finds represented in this play, as well as the way class mobility is represented through acquisition and consumption of things, that Dekker focuses on the material culture of the time. Comment on the exposition of race and class distinctions in The Shoemaker's Holiday. So this is an important question. The idea of race has been forcefully introduced in this play, particularly, as I was telling you, the presence of Dutch traders in England in the Elizabethan period was a threat sometimes to the English trading community, and the craftsmen also felt threatened by the presence of Dutch craftsmen, and the Dutch were given shelter in England because they were persecuted in the Netherlands. Therefore, England, being a Protestant country, was sheltering them. But the English people were very unhappy with the Dutch because they thought that the Dutch never returned anything to England as a kind of gratitude. So they did not show any gratitude, but they reaped all the advantages in England. Now, the traders and the guilds of the craftsmen, particularly the shoemakers guild, they had complained to the city authorities that Dutch shoemakers or Dutch craftsmen should not be allowed to work in England because the law clearly stated that for working independently in any craft, a person must have a 7-year apprenticeship before that under some skilled craftsman in the city. And the Dutch craftsmen or shoemakers or others who practice on their own, none of them had this 7-year apprenticeship. Therefore, if the law were properly implemented, then they would not have been able to work and earn their living in England at all. So on the one hand, the Dutch were taking unfair advantage in trade. On the other hand, they were eating up local employment or opportunities of earning, and the English craftsmen had to compete with them, which they felt to be unfair. So I have 1 or 2 papers where these anxieties of the Englishmen have been expressed, and this finds an expression in this play when Hans comes and seeks employment under Simon. Then initially Simon is reluctant, and he tells Hodge and others that no, we do not need another journeyman. We saw that even Marjorie was reluctant and Simon was also reluctant. But Hodge and Falk, they wanted another journeyman because there was a vacuum or an empty place after Ralph left for war. So they wanted somebody to share their work, which ultimately, since they started blackmailing Simon, and Simon could not let go such skilled craftsmen, therefore he was forced to accept Hans. So it is another story that later Hans becomes his helpful friend and becomes the cause for his rise in wealth and status. But through the initial hesitation of Simon, Dekker has expressed the anxiety of the English merchants, English tradesmen in employing people from other races or aliens in their business. Okay, so on the question of class distinction, that question is elaborately demonstrated, the issue of class distinction in the romantic plot or the marriage plots, and who becomes a gainer in cross-class marriage. How Rose is kind of an opportunist here who succeeds in attaining a higher status in life by marrying beyond her class. And Otley and Lincoln, they are represented in the play as those who want to preserve class distinction, who are against class fluidity or flexibility. But since in this play both Hammond is also able to behave like an aristocrat, even though he fails in his courtship with both Rose and Jane. But the way he behaves like an aristocrat, and he is never opposed on that ground, I mean, other than by Rose. And the way Simon is able to transcend his class barrier by becoming the mayor. And we see that class is depicted as fluid in this play. And even the king's power to make somebody a knight, which is demonstrated at the end, even though Lacy was a nobleman, but he was not a knight. So after he becomes knight, he is also elevated in his status. So Lacy had a journey had a downward journey because he stooped to become a shoemaker, and then he has an upward mobility as he is made a knight. Thus, in this play we may say that class distinctions are mentioned, but they are not preserved. On the other hand, class fluidity and class mobility is demonstrated. The next question I have more or less explained. How does the theme of class mobility find expression in the Shoemaker's Holiday? Therefore, you will have to talk about the career of Simon Eyre, who moves up the ladder by becoming rich and ultimately becoming the mayor. You have to speak about the career of Rose, who by marrying over her class, by marrying a nobleman, rises in status. You have to speak about Marjorie, who by dressing like a lady and by being the wife of the mayor also rises in her status. And therefore class mobility is sufficiently expressed through these actions of the play. And there is no downward mobility apart from Lacy's taking the guise of a shoemaker. So that is an indication that somebody might go down in social mobility because the possibility of becoming a bankrupt, the possibility of going to jail and going down in financial status, all these possibilities have been only briefly hinted in the play, but they are never materialized or demonstrated in the career of any character, which makes this comedy or much of this comedy in the realm of fantasy, because in reality the dangers of becoming bankrupt was great, and instead of becoming quickly rich, which was rare, but becoming quickly poor, that was more frequent. But Dekker conceals, we may say, this sad and melancholic aspect because he wants to present a lively comedy full of mirth and humor, and he does not want to bring in too many melancholic strains into the play. But he hints at those melancholic strains by repeated reference to the Ludgate prison, which was a prison for bankrupts, and the fact that Lacy had almost become a bankrupt, and that is why he was forced to earn his living by being a shoemaker, which was a shame for a man from an aristocratic origin. Okay, so class mobility, both upward and downward, they find mention in the play. The upward mobility is fully demonstrated, whereas the downward mobility is only hinted at or mentioned. Okay, and therefore, from the strain of my discussion, you realize that the next question: would you agree that The Rise of Simon Eyre is a fantasy? Can The Shoemaker's Holiday be called a realistic play? This question is an obvious output of the previous discussion. This question demands that we analyze the comedy and judge it in terms of realism. How far the Shoemaker's Holiday is realistic, how far it is a fantasy, and why the question of realism rises, because in the 16th century, with the rise of Ben Jonson's school of drama, realism more and more entered the theatre, and the contemporary vices, greed, cheating, fraud, all these find an expression in Ben Jonson's drama, which was a comedy of humor, and this had a great influence on later writers, other dramatists, and therefore this school of comedy was different from, say, Shakespearean comedy, because in Shakespearean comedy we find more of romanticism, more of fantasy, whereas in comedy of humor we find more of realism. And city comedy, we may say, is an output or a result of the comedy of humor. In this comedy also, Dekker frequently refers to humor. Okay, so therefore we may imagine that there should be realism in this play. If this play is in the tradition of the comedy of humor, and as a city comedy, if it displays city life, the anxieties of urban life, of trade and commerce, then there should be sufficient realism in this play. However, we see that even though the rise of Simon Eyre from a draper to the mayor of London is a historical fact which is found in the annals of London, and Delaunay borrows it from there, and Dekker further borrows it from Delaunay. So even though it was a historical fact, yet the rise of Simon Eyre in Dekker's play appears to be too smooth. That is, we are never shown the concomitant anxieties or doubts or the possibility of making loss which might be there, because Simon Eyre did not have initially the money to buy this cargo. He borrows from Lacy. Now how is Lacy able to lend him this money, I do not know, or we do not know, because a person who was almost bankrupt and who works as a shoemaker to earn his living, he is suddenly able to lend Simon a lot of money. So it strains our credibility. And secondly, what are the compulsions of the Dutch owner of the ship, that he has to sell the goods at a very cheap rate? Those are not mentioned. So not many facts are given to us on the issue of Simon Eyre suddenly becoming rich, and therefore this quick rich theme, it has an element of fantasy. It is a kind of wish fulfillment, and we are very happy that Simon becomes rich because he is very benevolent. He helps his workers in various ways, and he is a good man, and therefore we do not question how is it possible that he suddenly becomes rich. Now, one of the critics write that of course it was possible in the Elizabethan period to quickly become rich by a windfall profit, selling of the cargo of a ship or so, but one could always become suddenly rich only at the cost of another. So another person must be suddenly poor. So without depriving another person, it would not have been possible. So how does the Dutch captain or the Dutch owner of the ship fare, whether he becomes very poor, whether he goes to prison for being bankrupt? All these things are left unsaid. So we hear only one side of the story, and therefore we may say that the rise of Simon Eyre satisfies our wish. It is a kind of a wish fulfillment, but it is more of a fantasy to us because the logical explanations are not provided, and therefore the Shoemaker's Holiday cannot be strictly called a realistic play. We may say that there are elements of realism. For example, cross-class marriages were happening, class mobility was true, class distinction was becoming more and more fluid. Earlier it was very rigid. So insofar as Dekker displays these aspects, he is realistic, but there is definitely an element of fantasy in some of the representations of the getting rich quick theme in this play.